Hello and welcome to Wired for Change. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Today we're going to dive into the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to AI, as AI adoption accelerates across industries. Artificial intelligence is reshaping everything from hiring practices to healthcare, from financial services to law enforcement. But here's the challenge. AI is only as fair as the data that it learns from and only as ethical as the people who design and deploy it. When AI is trained based on biased data or without diverse perspectives at the table, the consequences can be severe, from reinforcing existing inequalities to marginalizing communities to creating systems that exclude rather than empower. So how do we ensure that AI serves everyone and not just a privileged few? How can organizations bake inclusivity into the very foundation of their AI strategies? And what happens when we get it wrong? In this episode, we're going to explore the risks of AI-driven bias, highlight some real-world examples of exclusionary AI and inclusive AI and what that looks like, and discuss some of the leaders and initiatives that are working to make AI more ethical, transparent, and inclusive. Because in a world that's being shaped by intelligent systems, ensuring fairness, representation, and equity isn't just the right thing to do. It's essential for a just and sustainable future. Let's dive in. I'm so happy today to have with us Kelly Geyer. Kelly is a people and culture transformation leader currently at Semperit AG Holding, which is a manufacturing company that is international but based in Vienna, where Kelly is joining us from today. Kelly is a global diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging professional with a track record of embedding inclusive leadership into corporate strategy, transformation, and influencing C-suite decisions. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us. Kelly, I want to congratulate you. You're also speaking in June in London at the European Business Change and Transformation Conference, and your topic is inclusive AI in transformation, ensuring equity, diversity in digital change. And what you're really bringing to the lens today is really that experience of change management and kind of seeing it go through what we're experiencing from AI, not just from a technical perspective, but from a change management lens at a fairly large organization and at previous organizations that you've been with. How did you get interested in this topic? How did it first flag you?
It's interesting. So I've been involved in IT for quite some time. I was an IT project manager. I was an agile coach. I'm a change manager. Then I started getting drawn towards these DEI and B topics. So these are the transformations that I was really passionate about. These are the ones that I got fired up about. Yes, IT implementations are also great, but really these diversity and inclusion topics were something that I really brought me a lot of energy. And so I started learning as much as I could. I tried volunteering for as many of those types of topics as possible and basically pushing my way into this industry, forcing my way in. And of course, as a woman, this topic pertains to me. This DEI topic pertains to me particularly. Then I started looking at the types of initiatives that are already out there and what's happening in AI, because this is obviously a pretty hot topic in the world today in 2025. Yeah. And then I wanted to go to the conference in June in London, the Business Change and Transformation. So I needed a topic to talk about. And so I thought, okay, how can I pull together the topics that I'm passionate about and that I have knowledge and experience in? So this is what brought me here.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. It sounds like it's going to be a great time, and it's certainly something that a lot of us can relate to, and something that's super important in terms of conversations. But help us to understand a little bit more about how important it can be to ensure inclusivity when implementing an AI solution. I think you have an anecdote.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I want you and your listeners, right, to think about something for just a little bit. Use your imagination just a bit. Think about you're laying in bed tonight and you wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. Something you can feel.
It never happens. I'm kidding.
For me,
Thanks,
I'm 46 years old. It happens more often than I care to admit. But you can feel that something's wrong. It's not just sweating. It's not heat. It's something else. There's a feeling in your body. Something isn't right. You're not able to breathe quite as well. your body just feels not right. So at first you think, okay, it's probably nothing. It's probably just anxiety. Maybe I ate something that's not sitting very well, but it isn't going away. So you grab your coat, you rush to the hospital, you get into the emergency room, and you grab your chest and you're at the front desk, right? The triage nurse enters your information into the system. They check your vitals, your age, your blood pressure, your pulse, what symptoms you're experiencing. Within a few seconds, the system spits out your risk score. So this is something hospitals do all the time in triage. They figure out who needs to be seen first, right? So the nurse or the doctor looks at it. Okay, you're not urgent. We'll get to you in a little bit. Take a seat. So you wait and you wait and you wait. And the pain is getting worse and you're feeling worse. You're getting dizzy and you can definitely feel something's not right. And the urgency doesn't seem to be there at the hospital. So you wave down a nurse, please help me. I'm really not doing well. Something is wrong. The nurse checks your chart again. Yeah, the system says you're low risk, but yeah, I'll go ask a doctor. You wait another hour. Finally, someone rushes over to you. And when the machines finally start beeping and going off, and it's too late, now you're having a heart attack. You're full-fledged heart attack. It's not until later you learn that this hospital is using an AI tool to assign risk scores to people. And unfortunately, this AI system was trained on historical hospital data. And in this data, certain groups of people, so women, people of color, people who are younger, were less likely to be diagnosed for early cardiac events. The AI learned the bias and now it's repeating it. So the algorithm really didn't see you. It saw a statistical pattern. And because that pattern was flawed, your life is at risk. And it almost cost you your life, right? So this is something where it is a big deal. I think people underestimate the importance of AI and how much it's being used at the moment. So it's really not science fiction. It's not something that's going to happen in the year 2090. It's happening now. AI is shaping the future of our lives in ways that we don't even see right now. And if we continue to train AI on incomplete or biased data, it's not only going to mirror the human discrimination, but it's going to automate it and amplify it. So yeah, this is one example of how it can really have a big impact and how important it is to start talking about this.
And I guess it's going to be easier to correct where we know that there is bias within the data, but there may be lots of bias that we're not even sure of or aware of or know the consequences of at this point in time, and more can arise. And lots of our data is incomplete. So I can see why this could be something to certainly to build into process as well, but we'll get into that a little bit later, I think. Any other real world examples that you can share with us that have been maybe published or are known just for some of our viewers?
There are countless. So when I was learning about this topic and I thought, okay, this medical situation might be a one-off thing, it was really easy to find huge cases of global companies where they tried to use AI, and because of biased data or biased algorithms, it had a really bad effect. So in 2015, Google Photos used facial recognition, and it led to absolutely offensive racial misclassifications. Their AI model was trained on a certain data set that underrepresented non-white individuals, and Google's AI mislabeled Black people as gorillas. I can't think of anything more offensive. And this was pretty early on. It was 2015, so about 10 years ago. So we think, oh, things might be getting better. And this is a global company, right? It's Google. Amazon in 2018 tried out an AI hiring tool. So they wanted some way to sift through all the resumes that they get and kind of screen who gets passed and into the interview stage. Again, it was trained on past hiring data. So the system downgraded resumes that had words like women's, so like a women's chess club. That wasn't something that at Amazon they typically hired for. So those resumes were excluded, and it was reinforcing gender bias. Really
because
interesting.
that wasn't a term that was present in the CVs or backgrounds of people that work there today.
Exactly. They ended up scrapping the tool. So instead of fixing it, they just said, forget it.
Wow. So I have women's snooker champion in my CV. I feel like I would have been excluded.
It really eliminated resumes that had those types of terms in the resume because those were not ones that had been hired in the past. In 2019, Apple and Goldman Sachs teamed up to create the Apple Card. They used AI to try to determine credit limits, and the tool significantly offered lower credit limits to women, even when the women had higher incomes and better credit scores than men had, because historically that was the decision that was made. So those are less life-threatening examples, but even in 2019, United Healthcare was using an AI tool to prioritize patient care. So the AI tool was wrongly assuming that when someone spent less on their healthcare, that meant they were healthier. It ignored systemic disparities in medical access. So it was deprioritizing Black patients, even when they had the same health issues as white patients. This was a big deal. And this again goes back to the original story of health. This affects your health. This could affect your access to healthcare. So yeah, those are just a few examples, and they're really not that old, and they have not improved dramatically since then. So like in Amazon's case, they just scrapped the hiring tool. Mm-hmm. Instead of fixing it, they just said, forget it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, these are things that are still going on.
And then, so help us understand how big this challenge would be based on how widespread AI is.
Right. This was something when I started learning about this topic, when I said, okay, this is a topic I really want to learn more about, I was shocked. Once again, you and your listeners, think about in your mind, what is the percentage of companies that you think are using AI right now in March 2025? They're either using AI or they're exploring the use of AI in their businesses. And think of the number. And if you need to pause the podcast real quick to think about it, and then I'm gonna say it. There are a few different numbers depending on which agency put the research together, but anywhere between 80 and 85%, and the most consistent number is 82% of companies are using AI or exploring the use of AI in their businesses. So this is a huge number. And these are companies large and small. Large, medium, small companies are looking at AI. And when we're talking in terms of younger people thinking of what kind of careers to get into, the AI market size is expected to grow at least 120% year over year. It's a huge opportunity for sure. And by the end of this year, it's expected that 85 million jobs might be eliminated because of AI. But it's expected that 97 million jobs might be created because of AI. So on the one hand, this is scary. Some people might lose their job. On the other hand, it creates a huge opportunity for people who are willing to kind of change gears and learn something new, because that's a net gain of 12 million jobs. Mm-hmm. And then just on a simple personal level, 77% of devices right now have some form of AI, whether it's digital assistant, ChatGPT, whatever, some kind of AI is on 77% of devices. So it is a big deal. Yeah.
Wow. And then it is certainly a lot that's out there. It's hard to consider anything without considering the impacts of AI now if you're working anywhere. And even if you're not working, it's all around you and you don't really know how it's impacting your life at this point in time. And do you think it's just a matter of maturity, perhaps, that over time AI will start to recognize for itself when there's potential bias, for instance, as it learns, or we develop better testing for it? Do you think this is an element of this is just where we are in terms of the maturity of the technology and how we interact with it?
For sure. I think there's an element of it's still relatively new compared to a lot of other things that we use every day, but it is based off data that we give it. And in the world as we know it, in pretty much every country in the world, there's bias, there's discrimination there. So unless we start to change, our AI is not really going to change. There are some tools that are just starting out where they're trying to train AI to detect bias, but those are still fairly new. So we're still in the phase now where you need people looking at it. It's a good question.
Thanks. And then who does this apply to? Who should be thinking about this? What are some of the different roles that people have in thinking about this challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy. Inclusive AI isn't just a tech issue. This is something that people in leadership need to be looking at. Decision makers for digital transformations. If you're working at a company, if you're the CEO, CIO, CTO, you're on the executive board, you need to be looking at DEI. You need to be looking at how do we make sure that what we implement isn't biased, that it's not excluding certain groups of people. And then you go to the teams that are putting it together, the teams that are actually developing. So the data teams, the developers, the data scientists, AI engineers, they need to be aware of training the data. Like, what data are we using? Where did that information come from? Is it representative? What kind of algorithms are we using? Are they fair? Are they making the decisions we want them to make? Or is it making decisions that have been made in the past? Because that's not necessarily what we want to replicate in the future. We need to look at ethical teams, right? So are we doing the ethical thing here with our AI development? And then also users. So employees, if you're using an HR tool and you're an employee, you want to make sure that's not biased, that we're considering all the different employees. And then customers as well. If you're a customer of a business that's using an AI tool, you also want to know that AI tool isn't being discriminatory. So it's really, and even on a government level, right? Even besides businesses and consumers, you have regulators, you have compliance officers who also need to be very aware of what to look for, because just as in most countries, or at least in Canada, the US, it's illegal to be discriminatory for a business. Just like a business can get into quite a bit of trouble when people are making those decisions that are discriminatory. Just because you've implemented an AI solution does not absolve you from that, from getting into trouble for those types of things. So regulators, and compliance bodies also, it's kind of everybody. who needs to be aware of this and who needs to be involved?
We could sit here for another couple of hours just listing off all the people, right?
We'll just say it's everybody. It's really, yeah.
Well, I think it is important to look at some of the different roles that should be impacted in case they're not thinking about that now. And the accountability issue that you raise is a good one as well, for sure. And we know that DEI has been something that has been fairly top of mind for a little while, I guess, if you look at historically. Maybe you could help us understand what was the state already of DEI. I don't expect you to be Wikipedia or anything, but just from your own perspective, DEI was something that a lot of organizations were working on. Then AI came along, and then now we've got some folks in politically challenging whether DEI is still important, and there's a little bit of conversation around that as well. What's your take on what's changing and what's kind of staying the same?
Yeah. I think there's a lot that's changing, obviously. However, there's also a lot that's staying the same. So if we look at what's changing to start with, there's obviously a lot of increased awareness and a lot of accountability. So organizations are recognizing now AI bias is a major risk, right? Like the companies we just mentioned a few minutes ago, Google, Apple, those companies, they're very aware now about the risk of not considering DEI when they're implementing technical solutions or AI solutions. And so companies are starting to establish AI ethics committees and governance frameworks. Obviously, these are on the larger companies because it's a lot cheaper to put together this committee than it is to fight a legal battle. So there's also these regulations and compliance pressures. So governments are now starting to get involved. Regulatory bodies are stepping in with stricter AI laws. Previously, it was 100% unregulated. And so now this is starting to shift a bit. And so there's also a shift towards diversity in AI development. So there's this movement towards having more diverse AI teams, right? If you have a very homogeneous looking development team, that's what you're going to build. So now companies are starting to realize how we need to have a diverse team to make sure that we avoid these types of pitfalls in the future. And so they are starting to implement some DEI checks into the data and the algorithm level when they're implementing these types of transformations. There's also been a little bit of advancement in AI bias detection. So we mentioned it a few minutes ago. So there's starting to be a few tools that you can use to detect and mitigate AI bias, but they're still fairly young. And then there's public and consumer expectations, right? When AI was first starting out, consumers would be a little bit more forgiving in this. Oh, okay, the Amazon hiring tool or the image detection that was a bit biased. It was racist. Like the AI is fairly new. Now it's not. While in the grand scheme of things, yes, AI is new. It has been around for a bit of time. So now consumers are starting to get a bit less forgiving, and companies are taking notice. But a lot is still the same. So while there's been a lot of changes, there's still a lot of things that are the same, right? Bias still exists. That has not changed. It can be argued whether it's gotten better or worse, but it still exists.
Yeah, you
There's
bring
also
up
the same. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, you bring up an important point about the larger companies recognizing this and forming committees and having processes around this and having this as a regular topic of conversation. I think that there's probably also a population of companies that they just want to make a jump into AI, and they may assume that the platforms that they're procuring or the solutions that they're looking at have got this figured out and have solved for this, and they just can buy it off the shelf and assume that it works, or maybe they're not really looking at the suitability or the fairness present in the data that they have today as well. So there are some barriers there for kind of maybe some of the organizations who might be earlier on in terms of technology maturity. Does that sound about right to you?
It does. And I think these companies look at this, it's similar to anything else you would purchase as an organization, right? If if diversity is not important to you as an organization, you won't be looking at it when you're purchasing an AI solution. You won't be looking at it when you're purchasing just a standard HR solution. You won't be thinking of these things. If it's already part of the culture, it's easy to just include AI in that. So when we were discussing who does this apply to, hey, procurement teams. And when I said everybody, I really meant everybody. When you think who's purchasing these tools for the organization, right? Procurement, purchasing, they also need to be asking these questions. Hey, does your tool come with something that will detect bias? Because that's important to our organization. These are all things that are still the same. So talking about what's changed and what's the same, it's the same with AI. So just like when you're purchasing something else for your organization, you still need to be concerned about the humans. So AI is tech, but it impacts humans. And these are the things that need to be top of mind at all times. Yeah.
Yeah, another big point for that is just in terms of the transparency. You may not know now when AI is being used to make a decision about you that will impact you, because it's not all set and mature and clear to people now. And it's a bit of a mess, probably, also, when you look at people trying to introduce AI in different points and just experimenting still, but still using those decisions within actual processes that affect actual people and have actual impact, as opposed to earlier on when you were talking about people who were more forgiving about these kinds of decisions. It was more, oh, neat. It's like entertaining in some ways for some people, probably, but not fully realizing that, oh, this is actually being used to make a decision about me, and maybe even not knowing after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we know it's important. We know that DEI continues to be important for many organizations, and that asking the question it's not just lip service. It's about looking at it very deeply when you look at technology, procurement and usage and deployment, and the after effects and the impacts of that over time. And then we've talked about how it might look a little bit different from organization to organization. Just IT implementations look different from organization to organization, but not everyone has the experience or leadership to put things into play. What are some of the risks of not seeing this, of ignoring EI and AI enabled digital transformation specifically? And I know we've talked about about some of the bad things that can happen. Maybe you can talk about risk a little bit more from a digital transformation perspective.
Yeah, this is the part that hits home, right? So the way I look at it, there's seven major risks of ignoring DEI in an AI-driven digital transformation. So we've touched on it a little bit, the legal and compliance risks, right? Just because you've now used an AI tool to make decisions doesn't absolve an organization from legal ramifications. So you're still liable if you're violating labor laws, if your DEI regulations will lead to regulatory fines and legal action, reputational damage, scrutiny from these compliance agencies that we talked about earlier. And then there's this loss of trust and employee engagement. So if employees realize, oh my gosh, like I was excluded because, I had one word in my CV that just didn't happen to be something that was looked at or promoted previously, you're losing the trust of not maybe just your customers, but your employees. And then employees just get disengaged. This costs money and it's hard to get back. Once you've lost employee engagement, it's very hard to get it back. And then the third risk would be reduced innovation and competitive edge. So when you're talking about things like hiring practices, if you fail to hire diverse groups of people, this lowers your ability to innovate. When you have homogeneous teams, you're stifling creativity. And you'll lose your competitive edge. If other organizations are doing it and you're not, they're going to take a step ahead and you'll be left behind in the dust, really. The fourth one is poor customer experience. If you are creating an AI tool or an AI solution as a business that impacts your customers and you've neglected an entire segment of your customer base, you're excluding them. This makes for a poor experience. So this is hurting your bottom line, literally. The fifth one is ineffective decision-making and strategy. So if your AI bias is distorting data and distorting data insights, it could lead to bad decision-making, right? If you're not looking at the right information, but you're using that information to make decisions, you're bound to make bad decisions. And then the other one, when we talked about kind of brand damage to the brand and the reputation. So when we talked about those examples at the beginning here, where it's Google and Amazon and those huge companies, that hurts. Customers and the population, the public, they don't forget about that kind of stuff. Certainly when it's a huge deal, when you're perpetuating racism, that's a big deal. And that's hard to come back from. And then on a more cellular level with workforce inequality and skill gaps. So if you're using AI for hiring practices and you're neglecting diversity, just like if you were not using an AI tool, you're going to end up with an unequal workforce and it's going to make it difficult to replace lower income jobs without reskilling people. So it could lead to disproportionately affecting marginalized communities and widening skill gaps and things like that. So there's significant risks to organizations who ignore or just simply neglect DEI when it comes to AI transformations.
That was a really good rundown, Kelly. I really appreciate it. One of the ones that stuck in my head was really the one around employees. And if they realize that there's some sort of negative impact from biased decision making within decisions that the organization has made, AI or not, you lose trust that way. And I remember back when I used to work on digital workplaces, there was a marketing kind of tool that was used for email where there was a case where people saw that they were clearly getting a certain marketing message inside of the organization based on their age, and they were not happy about that. And so I just think about the spread and scale of using AI in this case. Maybe you could do you have any thoughts from a change management perspective in terms of what that looks like and how easy it is to lose that trust and then to try to gain it back again, how tough that can be?
It's a very minor example. So I have a few examples, but because I don't want to rat out any of my former employers.
Fair enough. We don't want to do that here.
None of it was done on purpose, but I do have one that was very simple where we really inadvertently and innocently excluded an entire continent of our organization by doing something really simple. So we used a bit of AI, right? Chat GPT. I can't remember if it was Chat GPT or Microsoft Pilot. I can't remember. To create some text, help us create some text for our global town hall. And yeah, it created this great text. Yeah, welcome everybody. Yeah, it's been a great year and blah, blah, blah. And, where the winter's over, we're really looking forward to getting into summer. It's very exciting. Meanwhile, we're based in Europe. Fantastic. We're a global organization. And afterwards, we got a few messages from our colleagues that were in South America saying, it's a bit rude. It's winter over here. And I felt horrendous because I work in a global role. I should have caught it. But because the team working on this global town hall was based in Europe, right? So we didn't have a diverse team. This is one of those risks. We didn't have a diverse team from across the globe looking at the global town hall before it went out. We had just us in Europe. So we thought, yeah, this sounds great. Super. And yeah, we had to do some backtracking. I did a bit of apologizing. Yeah, you are 100% right. I will make sure going forward that we make sure that we're talking about things that are relevant, or that we at least say, hey, for everybody here and here, summer's here, for everybody here and here, welcome to the winter. So that we need to keep an eye on those things. And so it changed even the way that I use my prompts. I use ChatGPT all the time. And so when I'm working on something where it will be a presentation to a large audience, I make sure to put it in my prompts. Hey, this will be a global audience. It's going to be men and women. It's going to be people of this age and there'll be non-native English speakers. And even still, it needs a human eye. Even with all of those prompts, it still requires my eyes to look at it and say, oh, no, there's, or I need to say, oh, I forgot to add this prompt. So like I said, AI is not perfect yet. And like I said, hopefully this was a really small, minor example of just, hey, for us over here, it's not summer. We're in the middle of winter. You're making us feel really excluded over here. Like you don't even care that you have a whole segment of your employees in another part of the world. You're leaving us out. And yeah, that was something so small.
It seems like such a small
easy.
thing, but it's a thing that they're going to remember, right? And it's that talkable piece that they'll remember for a long time, probably as well. So yeah, small things, but can have an impact. And you don't know how they're going to take it. So I appreciate that, and also the prompting as well. You can prompt and prompt, but that human eye, and humans can make mistakes too. We'll throw it all into the mix, do our best. But thank you for that example. And I guess things will move forward. And I don't think you're saying not to move forward. I think you're saying to recognize the risks, but where do you stop thinking about the risks? And are there any established ways yet of just assessing or quantifying the risk and knowing that is going to be something that, it will be unique in terms of profile to each organization? Are there any ways to make this easier? Because I know that the sense within an organization is going to be, well, we need to do it. We're going to move forward. We need this tool. It's going to make a big difference. We need to deploy this, or we need this transformation because of the benefits it brings, and we can't discuss risk forever. Are there any tools for that assessment yet?
Yes, there were a lot of those, because I was thinking the same thing again when I was learning about this topic and figuring out, okay, I'm still deeply involved in technical transformations and organizational transformations, and AI is creeping in everywhere. And, what can we do? We can't do everything manually. We can't rely on Kelly putting in the prompts to ChatGPT to make sure that we have all of our bases covered.
And test with every person in the organization.
We can't always put in, hey, can you guys look over the town hall presentation? And then, yeah, when you're talking about really things that matter, like medical things, you need to build in these checks and balances. I was able to gather a lot of information, and there are several frameworks and methodologies that exist already and that are going to continue to improve. And there's kind of 4 categories of those. So there's audits that you can put in place, just like a regular audit. So there's testing that you can do to make sure that your algorithms are fair, and that there's even ones, I think IBM has one, Google has one, Microsoft has one, and these are helping organizations to measure how their AI models treat different demographic groups. So this is really important. This gets built in just like in any other IT transformation where you have testing. This just needs to be included in your suite. Then there's model performance disparities. So analyzing the AI predictions. And so this is another kind of tool to use. And then data representation audits. So ensuring that the data that you're training includes diverse populations. This just makes sense. And then the second category is like legal and compliance risk assessments. So the first one is more like testing outputs, right, of the technical solution, but then also looking at from a legal standpoint and a compliance standpoint, violating AI and DEI regulations can have a big impact. Building that into your test criteria, your definition of done, whatever methods you use to develop the solutions, need to keep in mind what these legal and compliance risk assessments are. The third one would be like financial and business impact. So looking at, okay, if we don't fix this solution, if we go ahead with our AI solution and it excludes this portion of the population, what's the loss of market share for us here? And you decide whether that's worth it or not. And then assessing what's the cost of litigation. Is it cheap? Like I just made a quick mention of it earlier. Is it cheaper to put together an ethics committee, or is it cheaper to litigate if we get caught? Most of the time it's cheaper to put together that ethics committee.
or depending on who's on it.
Yeah, depending on who's on it. Yeah. And assessing when we're talking about like hiring tools in HR, AI in HR, you're talking about employee productivity and retention and assessing, look, if we go ahead with this tool and it excludes a certain group of people, blah, 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 and that affects our retention. Obviously, that's a cost. Most organizations have some idea of how expensive it is to replace someone who's left. And then the fourth one was assessing what the loss is, your reputational loss. There's a cost to that, right? When Amazon used this hiring tool, there was a certain reputational cost. When it made the news, this damages your brand. And there is a cost to that. So there's a consumer trust scores and a brand sentiment analysis. So they're all, I don't know, I'm not the expert on all of these things, but these are the types of kind of assessments and metrics and things that I was learning about when I was diving into this topic.
Nice. No, I appreciate that run through. Are there any kind of success stories or successful frameworks or practices or regulations that you found inspiring in your research that maybe came from other countries or organizations that you saw where they're making some good progress here?
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised because I would say probably a year and a half ago, I really assumed that, oh my gosh, AI is just this highly unregulated, wild technology. And who's going to come to our rescue? Because I could see already this could be really dangerous. I can't remember the name of it. There's this great documentary on Netflix with Bill Gates where he even is saying AI is really scary. I'm scared. And it was like, oh my God, if Bill Gates is scared, I'm really scared.
Right.
I thought, oh my God. I was listening to this guy. If he's worried about it, I'm definitely worried. But there is starting to be some changes. So the EU, starting last year, has put together an Artificial Intelligence Act. I believe it was enacted in August of last year, sometime summer, fall last year. And this is aimed at categorizing AI applications by risk. So say something like healthcare decisions or in the emergency room, that's pretty high risk. You're going to need that to be highly regulated. And you want a lot of checks and balances, and you want to make sure that it's meeting regulatory requirements, the AI tool. So something like image cropping for Twitter is relatively low risk from a person standpoint. From a business standpoint, you could damage your reputation and all that. But from a consumer protection standpoint, that's relatively low risk. If you're cropping people out of photos, that don't fit the data set that you tested it on, it's not that big of a deal. But something like healthcare education, this is what this EU AI Act is aimed at resolving. And then they have the Council of Europe has created a framework on AI. And I believe this was last year as well. And they introduced an international treaty on AI focusing on preventing misuse, aimed at preventing the spread of misinformation and biased decision-making. So again, these are two that are relatively new. So just last year. And then I know the United Nations is working on launching an advisory body that kind of is comprised of everybody. Just, yeah, it applies to everybody. It's going to be comprised of technology people, government people, academics, so people involved in education, to create some kind of recommendations for AI governance. So there's some movement happening. It's still relatively new, but yeah, I would say it's starting. And then there are a few standardization efforts that are underway when we're talking about ethical frameworks. And this is a tougher one because what's ethical to one person is not ethical to another. So it's very difficult to come up with kind of standards that are universal. But there's the Alan Turing Institute has developed some ethical frameworks that are emphasizing values like individuality, individual dignity, inclusivity, social justice, things like that. And then if I remember the acronym IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. It's a mouthful.
That's right.
Yeah.
IEEE is this.
Yeah, IEEE.
That's right.
They're looking at addressing the ethics of autonomous systems. So this is a bit over my head, over my very generic head, but they're also looking at the societal values and ethical principles and addressing things like that. So there's some promising things happening for sure.
But probably not moving as fast as AI is advancing and proliferating, right?
Unfortunately, yeah. I think it's a matter of business, right? So there's a lot more money in creating AI solutions than there is in regulating it.
It's interesting. If you project the next few years based on that principle or that dynamic alone,
yeah.
We're going to need a really big safety net for everyone, I think. Yeah, it's super interesting though, and looking at ways to ethically accelerate the development of those ethical frameworks and principles that you mentioned it would be a nice thing to figure out, wouldn't it? All working together. So we've covered a lot today, and I really appreciate you sharing your research with us in preparation for your talk as well. And there's lots of different perspectives on it. And I think that I'd really like to ask if there are any last sort of key messages or tools that you might want to share with people and add in from your personal experience or your hope even for where this will go moving forward.
Yeah, I think if I were to leave people with something, it would be to start with DEI. So if you're a company, then you're working on creating an AI solution, consider DEI from the beginning. It's a lot easier to build it in during the solution design phase, right? During the thought process, build it in. How are we going to make sure that our data set is representative? How are we going to ensure that the group of people working on this is diverse and representative? And I think that's a good way to start, is to have it in your mind, start learning, right? Create diverse teams and create a governance from the start to make sure that AI is developed, tested, monitored by diverse teams to prevent narrow perspectives. And then try to implement those audits from the beginning. So start thinking about those checks and balances and how are we going to test it? Now, we tried to keep in mind diversity and inclusion when we were building it. Now we've built it. Now we're going to test it. How are we going to ensure that we built what we thought we built? And then keeping some transparency there as well. When we're faced with an AI tool that's making decisions for us, I want to know how it's making that decision. I don't want it just left in the universe, in the invisible, behind closed doors. But there's this term I came across as XAI, so explainable AI. And this is something consumers want as well. So make sure that those AI decisions are interpretable and they're accountable and that they're fair, because you will need to explain them, whether it's to your consumers, whether it's to a regulatory body. You're going to need to explain how your AI is making those decisions, how you trained it to make decisions. And then I think just keeping in mind ethical AI development, making sure that these AI policies are aligned with DEIB goals. And again, if it's not part of the company culture, it's difficult to make it part of the AI culture. So this does take a more global view and look at your organization and the world around. And it's, if diversity and inclusion isn't important as an organization, they won't see it as important in an AI solution. So it's a bit of a culture change as well sometimes, or if it's part of the culture, then it's just a matter of, hey, it's already part of our company. We just need to make sure we account for this in our AI solutions. And then, of course, as a former Agile coach, it's continuous learning. Like you mentioned it before, right? AI is going fast. It's the things that are happening so quickly that what I learned 6 months ago about this topic is barely relevant anymore. I'm constantly learning. Even my talk at the conference in June, I will need to keep up with this topic until I get there and I do the session.
You almost don't want to start doing the research until a couple of days before. Right?
There'll be new examples by then, right? Instead of Amazon, Google, Twitter, there'll be new examples by that point it's just happening so fast. So implement this continuous learning and feedback loops into AI. So because
and we may see a shift, right, from the human effort being at the front end of things, making manual decisions and you just putting everything together, to shifting to that continuous process and the check-ins where AI is doing more of the front end work. And then we as humans need to be more part of this ongoing process, because it's not a one and done deal. You don't just design and deploy it and then that's it. You've got to put a lot more in afterwards. And then thanks for bringing up the explainability part of it as well. It's interesting. The other day I asked ChatGPT to explain to me how it arrived at something, and then it apologized and decided to rewrite its answer. And I thought, wow, how many things what other points did I not ask for an explanation? And then it didn't go back and revisit and realize that it needed to apologize to me. Like, how many apologies does it owe me at this point? I don't know.
Wow.
So it may owe apologies to others as well. And that's what we need to keep track of. And then is an apology going to be enough at that point? Because as you raise, some of these risks are quite high. And I'm glad to hear of the progress that is being made to stratify different industries and areas where more regulation is needed. And it parallels data and thinking about the regulation of privacy and data and all those pieces as well, where it can have quite an impact on people. So again, I think we have that bringing together of technology and impact and process and organization and system, and thinking about what kind of systems are we creating for the future, and what role do we have to play in that, and not just at the front end, but also where you rightly say it's important to bake into the foundation, but also baking in that ongoing process as part of the foundation as well. Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's such a great topic. I feel like we'll need to revisit it every few months, like many other topics that we talk about on this show. Thanks for sharing your time with me. And I'm happy to share any links as well in the post when we share this episode out. And I encourage everyone to think about how this impacts them, because it is a role that it affects everyone. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. It was like talking with a good friend. So I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Take care.